If you're watching us on the internet, hello. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and we're streaming. So, let's go. Today's story is The Elephant's Child. You ready? The Elephant's Child. On the high and far off times, the elephant, oh best beloved, had no trunk. Only a blackish, bulgy nose as big as a boot that he could wriggle about from side to side, but he couldn't pick things up with it. But there was one elephant, a new elephant, an elephant's child, who was full of satiable curiosity, and that means he asked ever so many questions. And he lived in Africa, and he filled all Africa with these satiable curiosities. He asked his tall aunt, the ostrich, why her tail feathers grew just so. And his tall aunt, the ostrich, spanked him with a hard claw. He asked his tall uncle, the giraffe, what made his skin spotty. And his tall uncle, the giraffe, spanked him with his hard hoof. It's like I said, different times. And still he was full of satiable curiosity. He asked his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, why her eyes were red, and his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, spanked him with her broad hoof. And he asked his hairy uncle, the baboon, why melons tasted just so. And his hairy uncle, the baboon, spanked him with his hairy paw. And still he was full of satiable curiosity. He asked questions about everything that he saw, or heard, or felt, or smelt, or touched, and all his uncles and his aunts spanked him, and still he was full of satiable curiosity. One fine morning in the middle of the procession of the equinoxes, this sustainable elephant's child asked a few fine questions that he had never asked before. He asked, what does the crocodile have for dinner? Then everybody says, hush, in a loud and dreadful tone, and they spanked him immediately and directly without stopping for a long time. By and by, when they had finished, he came upon Kolokolo bird sitting in the middle of a wait-a-bit thorn bush, a wakabiki, and he said, my father spanked me, and my mother spanked me. All my aunts and uncles have spanked me for my satiable curiosity, and still I want to know what the crocodile has for dinner. Then Kolokolo bird said with a mournful cry, go to the banks of the great grey-green greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, and find out. The very next morning, when there was nothing left of the equinoxes, because the procession had proceeded according to a precedent, this satiable elephant's child took 100 pounds of bananas, the little short red kind, and 100 pounds of sugar cane, the long purple kind, and 17 melons, the greeny crackly kind, and said to all his dear families, goodbye. I am going to the great grey-green greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, to find out what the crocodile has for dinner. And they all spanked him once more for luck, though he asked them more politely to stop. Different times. Then he went away, a little warm, but not at all astonished, eating melons and throwing the rind about because he couldn't pick it up. He went from Grahamstown to Kimberley, from Kimberley to Cummers Country, and from Cummers Country he went east by north, eating melons all the time, till at last he came to the banks of the great grey-green greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, precisely as Kolokolo bird had said. Now you must know and understand, O best beloved, that till this very week and day and hour and minute, this insatiable elephant child had never seen a crocodile, and didn't know what one looked like. It was all the satiable curiosity. The first thing that he found was a bi-coloured python rock snake curled round a rock. Excuse me, said the elephant's child most politely, but have you seen a Excuse me, said the elephant's child, but could you kindly tell me what he has for dinner? Then the bi-coloured python rock snake uncoiled himself very quietly from his rock and spanked the elephant's child with his scalesome, flailsome tail. This poor elephant. That is odd, said the elephant's child, because my father and my mother and my uncle and my aunt, not to mention my other uncle, the hippopotamus, and my satiable curiosity. I suppose this is the same thing. So he said goodbye very politely to the bi-coloured python rock snake, and helped to coil him on the rock again, and went on, a little warm, but not at all astonished, eating melons and throwing the rind about, because he couldn't pick it up, till he trod on what he thought was a log of wood at the very edge of the great grey-green greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees. But it was really the crocodile, O best beloved, and the crocodile winked one eye, like this. Excuse me, said the elephant's child most politely, but do you happen to have seen a crocodile in these promiscuous parts? Then the crocodile winked the other eye and lifted half his tail out of the mud. The elephant's child stepped back most politely because he didn't wish to be spanked again. "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile. "Why do you ask such things?" "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, "but my father has spanked me. My mother has spanked me, not to mention my tall aunt, the ostrich, and my tall uncle, ever so hard, as well as my broad aunt, the hippopotamus, and my hairy uncle, the baboon, and including the bi-coloured python rock snake, with the scalesome, flailsome tail just up the bank, who spanks harder than any of them. And so, if it's quite all the same to you, I don't want to be spanked any more." "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile, "for I am the crocodile." And he wept crocodile tears to show that it was quite true. Then the elephant's child grew all breathless and panted and kneeled down on the bank and said, "You are the very person I have been looking for all these long days. Will you please tell me what you have for dinner?" "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile, "and I'll whisper." Then the elephant's child put his head down close to the crocodile's musky, tusky mouth, and the crocodile caught him by his little nose, which up to this very week, day, hour, and minute had been no bigger than a boot, though much more useful. "I think," said the crocodile, and he said too between his teeth, like this, "I think today I will begin with elephant's child." At this, O best beloved, the elephant's child was much annoyed, and he said, speaking through his nose like this, "You be hurting me." When the bi-coloured python rock snake scuffled down from the bank and said, "My young friend, if you do not know immediately and instantly, pull as hard as you ever can. It's my opinion that your acquaintance in the large patent leather ulster," and by this he means the crocodile, "will jerk you into yonder limpid stream before you can say Jack Robinson." This is the way bi-coloured python rock snakes always talk, by the way. Then the elephant's child sat back on his little haunches and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose began to stretch. The crocodile floundered into the water, making it all creamy with great sweeps of his tail, and he pulled and pulled and pulled. The elephant's child's nose kept on stretching, and the elephant spread his little forelegs and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose kept on stretching, and the crocodile threshed his tail like an oar, and he pulled and pulled and pulled, and at each pull the elephant's child's nose grew longer and longer, and it hurt him. The elephant's child felt his legs slipping. He said through his nose, which was now nearly 5 feet long, "This is too butch for me." That's what it says. Then the bi-coloured python rock snake came down from the bank and knotted himself in a double clove hitch round the elephant child's hind legs, and he said, "Rash and inexperienced traveller, we will now seriously devote ourselves to a little high tension, because if we do not, it is my impression that yonder self-propelled man of the war with the armour-plated upper deck," and by this he meant, beloved, he meant the crocodile, "will prematurely vitiate your future career." This is the way all bi-coloured python rock snakes always talk. So he pulled, and the elephant's child pulled, and the crocodile pulled, but the elephant's child and the bi-coloured python rock snake pulled hardest. And at last the elephant let go of the elephant child's nose with a plop, and you could hear. Then the elephant's child sat down most hard and sudden, but first he was careful to say thank you to the bi-coloured python rock snake, and next he was kind to his poor pulled nose, and he wrapped it all up in cool banana leaves and hung it in the great grey green Limpopo to cool. "What are you doing that for?" said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child, "but my nose is badly out of shape and I'm waiting for it to shrink." "Then you will have to wait a long time," said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "Some people do not know what is good for them." The elephant's child sat there for 3 days waiting for his nose to shrink, but it never grew any shorter, and besides, it made him squint. For, O best beloved, you will see and understand that the crocodile At the end of the 3rd day, a fly came and stung him on the shoulder, and before he knew what he was doing, he lifted up his trunk and hit the fly dead with the end of it. "Vantage number 1, said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "You wouldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Try and eat a little now." Before he thought what he was doing, the elephant's child dusted it clean against his forelegs and stuffed it into his own mouth. "Vantage number 2, said the bi-coloured python rock snake. "You couldn't have done that with this mere smear nose. Don't you think the sun is very hot today?" "It is," said the elephant's child. And before he thought he was doing, he slopped up a slop of mud from the bank of the great grey green greasy Limpopo and slapped it on his head, where it made a cool sloppy sloshy mud cap all trickling down his ears. Advantage number 3, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with a mere smear nose. Now how do you feel about being spanked again? Excuse me, said the elephant's child, but I should not like it at all. How would you like to spank somebody? Said the bicolored python rock snake. I should like it very much, said the elephant's child. Well, said the bicolored python rock snake, you will find the new nose of yours very useful to spank people with. Thank you, said the elephant's child. I'll remember that. And now I think I'll go home to my dear families and try. So the elephant's child went home across Africa, frisking and whisking his trunk. When he wanted fruit to eat, he pulled fruit down from a tree and set grass up from the ground instead of going on his knees as he used to do. When the flies bit him, he broke off the branch with a tree and used it as a fly whisk. He made himself a new, cool, slushy, squashy mud cap whenever the sun was hot. When he felt lonely walking through Africa, he sang to himself down his trunk. The noise was louder than several brass bands. He went especially out of his way to find a broad hippopotamus. She was no relation to his, and he spanked her very hard to make sure that the bicolored python rock snake had spoken the truth about his new trunk. The rest of the time he picked up the melon rinds that he had dropped on his way to the Limpopo, for he was a tidy pachyderm. One dark evening he came back to all his dear families. He coiled up his trunk and said, "How do you do?" And they were very glad to see him, and immediately said, "Come here and be spanked for your insatiable curiosity." "Pah!" said the elephant child. "I don't think you people know anything about spanking, but I do, and I'll show you." He uncurled his trunk and knocked 2 of his dear brothers head over heels. "Oh, bananas," said they. "Where did you learn that trick, and what have you done to your nose?" "I got a new one from the crocodile at the banks of the great grey, greasy Limpopo River," said the elephant's child. "I asked him what he had for dinner, and he gave me this to keep." "It looks very ugly," said his hairy uncle the baboon. "It does," said the elephant's child, "but it's very useful." And he picked up his hairy uncle the baboon by one hairy leg and hove him into a hornet's nest. Then that bad elephant's child spanked all his dear families for a long time, till they were very warm and greatly astonished. He pulled out his tall ostrich on tail feathers, he caught his tall uncle the giraffe by the hind leg and dragged him through a thorn bush, and he shouted at his broad aunt the hippopotamus and blew bubbles into her ear when she was sleeping in the water after meals. But he never let anyone touch Kolo Kolo Bird. At last things grew so exciting that his dear families went off one by one in a hurry to the banks of the great grey greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, to borrow new noses from the crocodile. When they came back, nobody spanked anybody anymore, and ever since that day, O best beloved, all the elephants you will ever see, besides all those that you won't, have trunks precisely like the trunk of the satiable elephant's child. And that's today's story. Just So Stories by Rudyard Kipling. How the elephant got his trunk. I did not know that story. Yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we'll do another story tomorrow. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Let us know of any story you'd like to hear, and I will read it. We might break them up into parts as well. But thanks very much. Have yourself a lekker day. I'll be back again between 5 and 7 tomorrow afternoon. Find us on 9 Block Radio, some of the best music around. I'm going to play, I don't know what. What should I play next? Let's see. How about some Kings of Leon? This is Frontier City. I'll see you later. Goodbye.